verse of the stream is from Joshua 24, verse 15. And I was at school today, and part of our school's work is sometimes we just kind of walk around, we have a question of the day. Today's question was, why do people have a faith or a religion? Now, most of the answers were, well, because they're born that way or they were raised that way. And I will concede that probably is true quite a lot of the time, but it isn't always. In fact, one of the young people said, "Oh, that's not true all the time." But some people do genuinely choose it for themselves, and that's certainly true of my own children as well. Is that actually as that because that's not the full story. My own children, I've brought them up to know who God is, and they've experienced church on a regular basis. They know our values, but I've always sort of tried to say, actually, one day you need to make your own choice about this because you can't follow Jesus just because you're part of a family that does, or even because you're in a church. This is a choice that you have to make for yourself. And I think that's kind of what Joshua is doing at this point. So this is Joshua who is leading the Israelites. So if you don't know, that's in the Old Testament, and he was the leader. He'd taken over from Moses. That's a name you probably know of. And he took over from Moses and led the Israelites for many years. But now he's getting on in his old age, and he knows he's going to die. And so it's kind of like his final message, his epitaph, is that the word, where he kind of like, this is the big thing, the big truth that I want to impart. And he says, but if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourself this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your ancestors served before the Euphrates, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. You see, Joshua knew that the people were surrounded by other nations who had their own gods, small g, okay, and many in their own nation, many of the Israelites had taken on the practices of these other gods. They had taken on false idols and other ways of doing things. And so Joshua is kind of aware of this and is basically saying you need to give those things up. And he recounts all the good things that God has done for them, the way he's rescued them from slavery, how he's provided for them, how he has remained faithful to them. But ultimately, he says, you have to make a choice. You can either follow these other gods or you can follow the God. And I know what I'm doing. I'm following the God. You can't do both. You can't hold them both together at the same time. You have to pick one. And you know what? That same choice is there for us. See, I find that we often want to listen to the positive Bible verses or promises that God will answer our prayers, give us peace and joy and all that good stuff. And it genuinely is encouraging to hear that. But you only really experience the fullness of those promises when you choose to follow God. Because actually, eternal life isn't given to everyone, and not everyone's sins will be forgiven, and not everyone will be made right with God. Now, it's offered to everybody, but you have to have a choice, and then you have to choose. What are you going to do? Are you going to ignore it and follow the way of the world, or will you choose to follow God? And it's only then that sins are forgiven, eternal life is given, and the fullness of those promises are over your life. You won't get it by just being a part of a Christian family or going to church. You'll experience it when you say yes to Jesus. So that choice is yours. But as for me, I'm going to follow the Lord. So that's today's verse of the stream. Any comments or questions, chuck them in the chat below.